So hey guys, how's it going? I wanted to go over a few things on how I do my grinding. This is stock removal here. So I've ground it to thickness, the thickness I want at the ricasso. And now I have marked a center line. You can either do that with a height stand or calipers. And then I like to take a file guide and mark lines on each side of the ricasso, so I know that I'll have nice matching lines on both sides. And then what I'll do is I'll go into the grinding room, and I have about 15 thousandths line. I will put it on the table at an angle. Angle's irrelevant, but I will grind up to that line so that I have a witness line that as I'm grinding up, I know that I can keep grinding until I get to that point that I'll be at my thickness that I'm wanting. I leave it just a little bit thick so that I can finish things out, a little bit of hand finishing, so I can get the proper thickness that I like. So we'll move on over and go from there. Alright, so what I'm going to do, well, I got my belt tensioned, I'm going to loosen my tool rest. I'm just going to set it at an angle. The angle is not as important. I just want to be able to get fairly close to the belt. And what I've done is I have marked a line on the center of the blade. I have two lines on both sides where my plunges will start. And I also have measured up a reference line on both sides the same distance up. Now these are all guides. So I leave myself a little bit of room up towards the top just to kind of dial things in, and I'll get them pretty close the way they are. But the premise is I will use this tool rest and I will grind to this center line. Then I got about 15-20 thousandths marked out, and I will grind up to that line on both sides. So then I have a really good witness line. As I start grinding up the blade, I can quickly see how much material I have between the edge and there, and I can keep pushing that line up and up and up until I get it up here to where I want it. So this is a really quick way of removing material without having to keep an eye on things really well. And I won't go all the way back to this line. I will just remove to about right this point, so about a 1/4 inch away from it. I'm not even going to worry about the plunges. I will come back later and I'll dial those in. This is like a 50 or 60 grit belt, and I will come back in later with a little bit higher grit and feather those in. All right, so I'm right at about 22 thousandths on the edge now. So now I got a good center line. So if my marking gets washed off, I still got this center line, and I got a nice reference line. I'll be able to see this all the way down as I continue grinding up. So when I grind, one thing that kind of took me a while to put my head around is how to get the grind to go where you want it to go. And I know there's a lot of people that have talked about this, but for some reason different people explain it differently. It just clicked in my head one day that you're not actually, you're grinding down this ridge, and then you grind down the next ridge, but you're not necessarily pushing on that ridge. You're still keeping the same angle, but you're kind of tweaking the knife. You're applying the pressure on the bottom edge as you're grinding, it will move the grind up the blade. It took me a while to figure that out, and having a good grinder where it grinds enough material away to really get nice flat grinds and not have a bunch of facets. Okay, one thing I want to talk about real quick. This is the first side that I ground. It's got a nice length. There's still a little bit here on the edge. This other side, I've started to grind up. You can see the facet, and that's what I'm talking about. It's hard to see sometimes on a camera, but up close, you can see this other side. There's just a real small sliver sticking out, where this side, you can really see that facet still. And that's a quick guide just for me to remove a lot of material really quickly. Another thing is when I'm grinding, you'll notice my belt is tracking off to one side. And what I'm doing is I like to have sweeping plunges. Now you can't see it a lot right here, but it's starting to form a little bit of a radius. So if I'm grinding on this side, I'm going to let that belt hang off just a little bit, and I'm matching it up with that corner. That's kind of my reference I'm using. And so this belt is just hanging off just a little bit on that side. And I probably leave about that much when I'm running. It doesn't have to be exact. The more you leave off, the bigger the radius will be. If you square it up there, you're going to have sharp corners. I don't like sharp corners. It kind of gives you just a little bit of a radius to roll into. And it helps it when it comes to finishing for me. So. Okay, so we're at the point now where the blade is pretty well close to being ground where we want it. This is our line on one side and our line on the other side. Now both of these are not perfect. One side's off a little bit more than the other, but that's okay. We're pretty close to where we want to be. We're not all the way back where we have our plunges yet, and that's where I've stopped. And I've switched grits to, this is a 120. And what we want to do is we're going to get this guide right up in here. And right where that is, we're going to slowly grind away until it matches where we've already ground. So get you right up in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it at a little bit of an angle to keep it off this back side up here. I'm just going to let it grind up here and grind up here until it starts to match up with this bevel we've already established. And then I will be able to hold it right on the belt like I've been doing and move it in and out and just kind of feather the rest of this in. We'll have a nice sweeping plunge on both sides that line up. So that's the plan. We'll see how it turns out. So here's one side that we've ground now. We started back here and we kind of just ground, and sweep. Now, these aren't exactly matching at this point, but this is the other side. I'm gonna go ahead and grind this side in before I match them up here. So I wanna get these matching down here. Well, that's what it looks like.